I'm Ken Harbaugh.
What could possibly go wrong?
This is Burn the Boats, a show about making tough calls in tough times. America today faces a critical test. Our democracy is under threat. But good people are rising to the challenge. Now is the time to go all in. Now we burn the boats. My guest today is Al Franken. You know him as the former senator from Minnesota and Saturday Night Live writer. He's also the author of 4 #1 New York Times bestsellers and the host of the Al Franken podcast. We have a genuine celebrity on the show today for a change. Al, welcome to Burn the Boats.
Well, great. Thank you. It was great meeting you in L.A., by the way.
Yeah, likewise. Great meeting you, too. You're back on tour now. As your website says, you're the only former U.S. senator currently on tour. I have seen clips of your set, and I have always been surprised at your ability to maintain a sense of humor, even as our democracy is hurtling towards a cliff. How do you do it?
Well, you're assuming that the clips you saw, those were a few months ago. And right now, I'm having a hard time keeping my sense of humor. It's very, very dangerous right now. Our democracy is threatened. I was talking to Sheldon Whitehouse the other day. He's written a book about how the Supreme Court was captured. And we were both kind of talking about tipping points. And I think we were kind of coming to the conclusion that maybe instead of the tipping point is coming, is that we've already had the tipping point in terms of the destruction of our democracy. And we kind of started to go back to, well, first of all, Citizens United, which has allowed all this dark money in. And if you're watching the campaign ads, those are all those horrible, horrible, disgraceful negative ads about crime, et cetera, where, I mean, I have a former counsel, judiciary counsel, Josh Riley, who's running in the 19th district in New York. He's from there. He's a brilliant guy. He was my judiciary counsel for 4 years. And they run an ad where they have a guy cold cocking a guy on the street. You've maybe seen this because they have, these are cookie cutter ads. And they go like, you know, violent Josh Riley and his allies want to, you know, get rid of cash bail, you know, I mean, and his allies want to defund the police. And they run a thing going, defund the police, across his face. He and I together gave millions and millions and millions of dollars of funding to local police forces for crisis intervention training. That was my bill that I did with Cornyn, was my lead co-sponsor. And he worked with Cornyn's Judiciary Council to get this. And this crisis intervention training is training for cops to recognize when they're in a situation that's fueled by either mental illness or, in some cases, drugs, and how to de-escalate. And so but it's a cookie cutter ad, and it's paid for. It's all dark money. It's all dark money. So there's Citizens United, Shelby County, then Garland, not taking up Garland, and then Trump. And I'm just very worried right now about our democracy. And there's so many of these Republican candidates all over the country who are running in key positions like secretaries of state, et cetera, are deniers. And it's very dangerous.
Yeah, you were sounding the alarm about this long before most people were paying attention. I'm thinking about your first book about Rush Limbaugh, and
Rush
then
Limbaugh is a big
your
fat idiot, and other
Rush
observations.
Limbaugh is a big fat idiot, and
And
then
other
Lies and the
observations.
Lying Liars, right, and other observations.
And then
I,
Lies
I
and
heard
Lying
you talk.
Liars.
Right. It seems like you're working your way through the media conduits that are most manipulative of people on the right. You started with Rush Limbaugh and AM radio. You went to Fox News with Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them. The dominant force now seems to be this social
Yep.
media ecosystem in which literally an alternate reality has been created. Have you begun to think about how to take that on after tackling AM radio and Fox News? We're in a brave new world now.
I think we should look at Section 230 of the, what's that, the Internet Decency Act or something?
Right.
And that was at the beginning of, of the internet. And it was, there's a reason for this, which was basically say that, Facebook or those platforms are platforms and they're not publishers. So they can't be responsible for the content. So people can put content on there and they can't be responsible for it. And that was a First Amendment impulse. And it was, they just did not understand what was going to happen. And if you look at Facebook, Facebook has all these sophisticated algorithms. They feed this stuff to the people on Facebook, and they know what the algorithms that Facebook has is. Their whole algorithm is what's going to keep you on, right? And so they're feeding, and they know that people getting agitated keeps them on. So the idea that they can't control this is absurd. They're the ones with the algorithm. They're the ones pointing people to this content. So I think that we have to revisit Section 230, which basically said these platforms can't be responsible for the content, and they need to be responsible. And we have to demonstrably false information should not, there needs to be a way to do it where you're not stopping any kind of legitimate discourse, legitimate discussion of opinions and stuff, but you can't have just these lies going out.
Well, we have mechanisms in other media that address this, like libel laws, and certainly other countries can provide some instructive examples. The idea that American exceptionalism requires us to put up with this, I just think is false.
Yeah, I mean, the libel laws, I suppose, still hold. I think Alex Jones, hopefully, will cough up the $1 billion and be forced to, and that will chase him. But I mean, think about how pernicious and painful and awful that was, and how dangerous all of this is. I mean, and this is part of that tipping point is social media, obviously, and sort of the dumbing down in our discourse. Twitter, I use Twitter. I have a lot of followers on Twitter. I tweet, but it basically people like to get reaction and followers, and it seems like there's not much room for sophisticated, thoughtful dialogue very often.
Are you surprised at how quickly this has all happened, how fast the right has descended into this pit, into this alternate universe? I'm thinking about your very competitive election, which you won by 312
Yep.
votes, and both sides accepted it. That was not that long ago. There was a Washington Post editorial that brought it up, and the title of that editorial was "Americans Care About Democracy, Just Not Enough to Save It." I cannot imagine if your election had happened today that both sides would have accepted the result.
Well, certainly the other side would not have accepted the results. As it was, there were, some jerks who would go like, well, they had, you know, that this many people show up who weren't legal, you know, that bullshit. But very, very little of it. Part of it was that we did it so transparently. We, in Minnesota, part of the reason it took so long for me to be seated is that we're Minnesota. And we had, first of all, in other states, I would have been seated right away after I won the recount in time to be seated with my colleagues. But then he had an election contest, which is a legal thing, and that took forever. We had a 3-judge panel, and they were just so thorough. And actually, I think I had won by 260 some, and then it went up to 312 after that. But we did it so transparently. Every vote in the state was on paper, and every vote was hand counted with a member of a Coleman person there and a Franken person at the table. And you could challenge a ballot, and it would go up, and then there were so many challenged because, but at a certain point, we winnowed the ones that were legitimate challenges. We put them up online. Every ballot was online for everyone who wanted to see it to see. I don't know if that happens today. I mean, those were the rules. Those were the rules. And but no. I mean, the person running for Secretary of State now in Minnesota, the challenger, the Republican challenger, is an election denier. And the fact that this has happened is just frightening. It's frightening. And I think the horse is out of the barn. I don't think we're ever getting this horse back in the barn.
Well, I hate to hear you say that. And you've talked about the tipping point, and the implication is that you don't return from a tipping point. But I can't I can't live there. So what are the urgent actions we need to take today to at least have some hope of recovering?
Well, one, we have to win these elections. And, you know, right now the trends aren't great. But, you know, if you're watching this, you might want to door knock. I won, as you said, by 312 votes. Think about that. You know, the people that door knocked for me won that thing for me. I mean, that's one person door knocked more than 312 people in the last week. I mean, so get out there, vote obviously, but do everything you can between now and the election to try to persuade people. And door knocking is a great way to do it. Also, door knocking, you learn a lot. You learn what people are really thinking. It's the best kind of polling there is. You give money to Unite Here, which is the hospitality workers. They are on the ground in Nevada, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania. They're the hospitality workers. My PAC, Midwest Values PAC, always gives to them. I think we just raised $245,000 for them with a Zoom call. I had Conan O'Brien and Dee Taylor, the head of Unite Here. They were key in Georgia 2 years ago. There's stuff you can do the best thing I can do on this podcast is encourage your viewers and listeners to vote and to get out there and help, you know, phone bank, text bank, do any of that stuff. That's what we can do right here, right now, you and me. I can talk about it. But this is really scary. And the court is scary, and this North Carolina case is very scary. This independent state legislature doctrine that they're talking, which is basically that the state legislatures can decide elections without and how elections are conducted in their states without subject to the courts. That's extremely scary, and they've taken that. I hope that they don't decide for a North Carolina state legislature, because 2/3 of state legislatures are controlled by Republicans, and you know what they'll do. This would have enabled Trump to win.
I'm glad you're bringing up those threats because they don't get quite as much attention as the loud election deniers. But it's not just about casting doubt on the integrity of our elections, and it's not just about gerrymandering and voter suppression. It's about vote counting and who the legislatures send.
Yeah, and the court is all about other things too. It's about, obviously, overturning Roe, but it's also about the EPA not being able to have authority over greenhouse gases and to do something about it. And it's really friggin' frightening in many ways.
You've said that the Republican Party, and this is a quote, has ceased to participate in good faith in our democracy. I see that every day because I pay close attention, but for the skeptical Republicans, for my parents who don't pay attention every day, what are a couple clear examples, in addition to the loud election deniers, of the Republican Party literally giving up on governing, on democracy?
I think one of the best examples is the RNC saying that the insurrection on January 6th was, quote, legitimate political discourse.
I think that puts the exclamation point on it. Knowing that,
I mean,
and
come on, you know?
Yeah. You
it's
have
like,
colleagues
hello,
who are...
we no longer believe in democracy.
What is the point for them? If you can take us inside the mind of some of your Republican colleagues in the Senate, what is the point of winning power if that's what it costs, undermining the very basis of that power, democracy?
I know what it is. I stay in touch with some of my former Republican colleagues, and I will give them crap. I'll text them, and I'll send. I send them Christmas cards, and I know I ask them about their families, and I know them, and we joke and stuff like that. I got along pretty well with my colleagues, I thought, and I will just chide them and basically saying, why can't you just come out and say that Biden won the election, and there'll be blah, 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 blah. And ultimately it comes down to I'd lose my primary. That's what it comes down to. I finally get them to say that. And these guys, I understand they want to be senators, and they want to stay in power, and they want to be senators. And, and each of them has different, Lindsey Graham, of course, went from, just hating Trump to playing golf with him. And Lindsey wants to be part of the action. He also wanted to get reelected in South Carolina. He wants to be in the game. And I think that's his whole life, basically. And that's kind of it. It's great to be senator.
How does that make you think about apportioning moral responsibility for January 6th? There's a lot we could point to, but I think that's a pivotal moment. When I think about all the people on the wrong side of the barricade there, how many veterans, for example, were among them? How many sincerely believed that they were the ones fighting for the Constitution? And then I think about the cynics who who drove them to those barricades from a safe distance. It is hard for me to decide
or who
to
were
be
attacked
angry at.
that day and who's I
Right.
mean, who were there. It's disgusting. They, I don't know how many it was, 12 or something senators who signed on to that thing saying we're going to challenge the certification. And what they wrote is that there are a lot more Americans than ever doubt whether it was fairly decided. Well, you know why? Because you guys have been saying this, and Trump has been saying it and lying. And then the sad part is that these January 6th hearings have been really brilliantly put together and presented, and it hasn't changed anything for these people. And that's really frightening. I mean, I just was assuming, like, okay, some of these people got to watch some of it, and it just hasn't changed Republicans at all. And I guess, like, I saw some polling, like 70% of Americans think democracy is at risk, and and some of them are right-wing people who think we're communists or socialists, and that's the risk. But a lot of people know it's the election denying and all that stuff. But only like 7% says it's their number one issue.
Right.
And boy, this just feels like how democracies go away.
Yeah. There used to be some kind of glue that held the Senate together. It operated on tradition as much as trust. You said recently that McConnell broke the Senate and have proposed what seemed to me like some pretty simple reforms. How far gone is the Senate today in terms of a lawmaking body? And are there simple tweaks that can help bring it back, or is it just culturally so corrupted that it has reached a tipping point as well?
It's funny. The first day I got there, finally, I was just talking to some of the veterans and some of the older Altacockers, as we say in Yiddish. And so it was like Lautenberg and Carl Levin and maybe Lieberman and anyway, Cole. And so I said, and they're going like, it's worse than it's ever been. They said this is like 2009, July of 2009. And so Levin says, no, it's been worse. Carl Levin, Michigan, great senator. So I said, when? He goes, 1854. And I said, Sumner being caned. He goes, yes. and I said, well, okay, that was in the lead up to the Civil War. He goes, yeah, but that was worse.
Yeah, every time I hear people say we've been through this before as a country,
It's the Civil War.
Right, we have, and it didn't go well.
Well, 600,000 dead.
Right.
But we ended slavery. Anyway, so for a while, and then we had Reconstruction. But then it just got worse from there. And McConnell, the reason I said that about McConnell is that after Obama got elected, they had a caucus. I think they had a retreat or something. And he told the Republican caucus, we're just going to make him a one-term president. And this is like, we just had this was the start of the Great Recession. We've had this horrible financial meltdown. And it's really serious. And they filibustered more the exact number of executive appointees or nominees that Obama put forward as had been filibustered in the entire previous history of the country. And that broke it. And then obviously the move on Garland, and he lied. Of course, he said it was the Biden rule. You remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Which is totally different.
Well, what Biden was talking about in '92 was not the death of a justice. What he was talking about, this was in June, which was at the end of a Supreme Court term. And he was saying that if a justice was going to retire so that he could be replaced by another conservative, that they wouldn't take up a nominee unless we were consulted, or even absent consultation, a moderate. That was the speech. McConnell would basically took a little part of the speech to say the principle was we will not take up anyone during an election year. And of course, this is June after. This is someone someone leaving so that he can be replaced by a conservative, as opposed to someone dying in February. And I remember him saying, well, there's already been primary votes cast in New Hampshire. And of course, Coney Barrett, this is their absentee ballots had been in. She was confirmed. She was seated like 8 days before the election.
Right.
So the bad faith, the obvious bad faith, is so ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we? I'm looking at your background. I see your American flag, and I've seen the challenge coins over your shoulder at other points during
this
your
is
interviews. How do we?
Let me see. There it is. That is. I got that in Afghanistan, and it's beautiful. I don't know if you can really see the work there because it was made by an Afghan artist, but it's I've seen a number of these. You've seen that kind of triangle. But this is so gorgeous. And I got that Camp Phoenix. I did 7 USO tours. I did 4 to Afghanistan and Iraq and Kuwait. And yeah.
Believe it or not, that's when I first became a fan as a young Navy lieutenant. I'm wondering now how Democrats should talk about love of country like that. How do we talk about patriotism? It seems everywhere we turn, the language of patriotism, the symbols of it have been hijacked by the extreme right. No one can forget the scenes of American flags the flagpoles being used as weapons on January 6th. How do we reclaim that?
I think we just talk about what we think the principles of this country are, and how, it's a sophisticated argument or discussion that we should be having. We have all this flawed history. And I think it's quite racist for them to do like critical race theory as, something that's not taught in any K through 12, Youngkin using that, and, DeSantis passing a law saying that, a teacher can be fired for making a kid feel uncomfortable about our history. So how do you teach American history? That's one of the things is we have to teach American history. Our education system is not what it should be. But we've got to talk about what we believe America is. And America is, first and foremost, about democracy and elections. And there's nothing more antithetical to America than what happened on January 6th, and who this president was, and what he has been saying, what he continues to say, and this denial is it's just lying. And we're supposed to be for truth, justice, and the American way, and that's what we're for. And that includes economic justice. You know, Paul Wellstone, you see right underneath that is
I see it. Yep.
Paul said, "We all do better when we all do better." And this country is at its strongest when there's a strong middle class. And I think we have to talk about that. And we have to talk about this enormous gaps in wealth and how that's not good for the country. It just isn't. And we should, you know, look, we're Democrats. We have our faults. I understand, you know, I represented all Minnesota. I met everybody. I saw really great people who were Trump supporters. But I also would go to, I remember in 2017 when the Republican health care bill would have gotten rid of Medicaid expansion. Over 200,000 Minnesotans got their health care through Medicaid expansion. But not only that, but what that did was amazingly beneficial to red areas of the state, because rural hospitals would have to eat it when someone came into the emergency room and wasn't covered. Well, now suddenly all these people were covered, and suddenly the rural hospitals were flush with money. So what could they do? They could get more nurses and doctors and more technology and expand their scope of care. They could do home health care. They could do all this stuff. And in many cases, the rural hospitals became the largest employer in the county. So when the Republicans said what they were doing, I would go to these red counties and go to have a town meeting in a hospital, and people were crying and nuts about it. And these were people in red counties. And so you have to be there. You have to go. You know, remember when Cruz went to Cancun and so then he lied and said, I was only going there to drop the girls off, and you know, that was a lie. But then Ben Shapiro said, well, what could he do anyway? I don't know if you remember this, but that really struck me, because I learned so much during disasters, during floods and tornadoes. And also, you can do stuff. You have big staff. You're one of only 2 statewide elected federal officials. You're in touch with FEMA. You can have FEMA get a diesel generator to a water treatment plant because the grid's down. But you also learn an amazing amount about people. And one of the things you learn about people is how great they are and how they step up for their neighbors. And you don't give a shit what their politics are. And we need to, as Democrats, show up. We need to show our willingness to listen. We also need to deliver strong messages and stand up for what we believe.
What are we getting wrong as a party in our messaging, and what are we getting right as well? But be critical here.
I think we just shy away. I think people are just too afraid and too cautious and too colorless. I know that, very often you have, and I had, really good advisors and media consultants and stuff like that, but a lot of it just starts to sound the same. And there are people who have, some people are more compelling than other people. It does help to have a compelling way of talking, but I do think that we're very afraid sometimes to go outside our box and to go outside what's been determined by pollsters and consultants to be what we should be talking about, and it just gets very, very politician-y.
Yeah. Al, this has been great. I want to end with a quote from a young Navy lieutenant written almost 20 years ago. If I'm not making it obvious enough, it was me in a U.S. Naval Institute piece writing about you. Here we go. Recently, comedian and activist Al Franken toured Iraq with the USO. By all accounts, the soldiers loved him. And Franken, though an ardent critic of the war, praised the military personnel unabashedly. The ghosts of Vietnam may not be completely exorcised, but Americans can still love their military, even if some loathe its assignments. Still, too many of our leaders fear that missions will fail if a majority of Americans reject them. So be it. Billy Mitchell said it best. Changes in military systems come about only through the pressure of public opinion or disaster in war. And I closed with, God willing, the wisdom of an informed public will save us from tragedy. I don't know how to feel about that 20 years later, but the lack of an informed public seems like it's dooming us to tragedy.
Yep. You're right. I mean, you're wrong. I reverse that. No, I mean, there's no real choice other than to keep trying, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope the tipping point hasn't happened yet.
I'm with you. Thanks for all you're doing, Al, and thank you especially for your tireless support of vets. If I'm not mistaken, one of your first actions in the Senate was supporting the PAWS Act, service dogs for vets. Is that right?
That was my bill. What happened was, so I won my election. I won the recount, but I was in court. So I went to the inaugural, and I had, had done a lot of USO tours, so I knew I was friends with Paul Rykoff, who's head of the AIVA, Iraq and Afghanistan Vets America. So I went to their celebration, and I met a wounded vet in a wheelchair who had a service dog, and Luis Montalban. And he said, I couldn't be here if it weren't for Tuesday. That was his dog. I said, tell me your story. And he was wounded in Iraq. He came back, lived in Brooklyn, was isolated, never left his apartment, was drinking. Some organization contacted him, said, we want to pair you with a service dog. He goes to Connecticut, gets paired with Tuesday. I said, what Tuesday do for you? He said, well, he can sense by smell when I'm going to get a panic attack and nuzzle me and prevent me from having it. I sometimes have these nightmares, these debilitating nightmares, and he'll jump on the bed and wake me up. If I don't take my medications at the right time, he'll grab me by my sleeve and take me to the medicine. He said, I was isolated. You have to take a dog out twice a day.
Right.
And people don't like going up to scruffy-looking wounded vets. They do like going up to scruffy-looking wounded vets who have a beautiful dog. And he went to grad school, became a writer. He wrote about it. So I had 6 months until I was seated, and the only thing I could do was raise money. I didn't talk about it at all. I was told, don't shut up, just let it go. So I just made it my business to find out about service dogs. And so as soon as I got to the Senate, I dropped a bill to do a study to see what the effect of having a service dog for a vet with PTSD would be. And it was it was a 3-year study matching 200 vets with PTSD with their dogs. The VA fucked up the study over and over again. It took 10 years.
Shocking.
It took 10 years, but and I was gone by then. But finally, when it came out, the effects were enormous. The benefits are enormous, and that's when we got the Pause Act, and so now more and more vets will be able to get service dogs. 20 vets commit suicide every day, and there's nothing like a dog. There's nothing like a dog, and service dogs are amazing. So when the study came out, I just cried.
Yeah. Well, you're making me emotional too now, Al. So we better wrap it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been fun.
Yeah, keep your
Thanks,
sense
Ken.
of humor. We need at least one former senator on tour who's funny. So
Yeah, Lieberman, not so
we'll come
funny.
find you. All right. Thank you, Al.
You bet. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Burn the Boats. I've got a quick favor to ask. If you haven't already, click the link below to the podcast page and leave a 5-star rating on iTunes. It's amazing how important those reviews are in growing shows like this and getting our message out. Thanks for the help.